The containment field hummed with a soft blue glow as 3 pairs of eyes stared at the strangest rescue operation in recent memory. Orvin pressed his thin, segmented fingers against the transparent barrier and tilted his triangular head to get a better look. Inside the field sat a tiny creature with long, dark hair and dirt-smudged skin, no taller than his knee joint. Curled beside her was something that looked like a flattened fur tube with silver stripes running down its back. "This is what came out of that wreck?" Orvin asked, his voice carrying that particular tone of scientific disappointment. "A juvenile and some kind of comfort animal?" Pren, the ship's medical officer, consulted her scanner for the 3rd time. Her green carapace caught the overhead lights as she moved closer. The small one is human, female, approximately 7 standard cycles based on bone density. The other creature registers as non-sapient, Earth origin, species designation unknown. Both are uninjured despite the pod damage. The human child hadn't moved since they brought her aboard the Talaran research vessel 4 hours ago. She just sat there, one small hand resting on the animal's back, watching them with dark eyes that seemed too aware for something so small. The animal appeared to be sleeping, its barrel-shaped body rising and falling with steady breaths. Captain Drevin entered the cargo bay, his tall frame making the doorway seem smaller. He carried an air of practiced calm that came from 2 decades of deep space research missions. "Status?" "Stable," Pren reported. "No signs of distress. The human has not attempted communication. Does she understand us?" Drevin asked. Orvin waved one hand dismissively. "Their translation implants are primitive but functional. She understands. She's probably traumatized. Humans are new to space travel. Their emotional resilience is likely limited." Drevin studied the child through the barrier. Something about her stillness bothered him, though he couldn't articulate why. In his experience, frightened creatures moved erratically or hid. This one just watched. "Lower the barrier. Let's see if we can communicate properly." "Captain, we haven't completed biological scans," Orvin protested. "You said they were harmless. Were you wrong?" Orvin's mandibles clicked in irritation, but he input the command. The blue glow faded, and suddenly only air separated them from their guests. The human child's eyes tracked the change, but she didn't move. The animal's ear twitched once. Pren knelt down, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She'd raised 3 offspring of her own and knew how to approach frightened younglings. "Hello, small one. I am Pren. You are safe here. Do you understand my words?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the child's lips moved and a soft voice emerged. "Yes. Good, very good," Pren encouraged. "What is your name?" "Riley. Riley, that is a nice name." "Can you tell me what happened to your pod?" The child's hand stroked the animal's fur in a rhythmic pattern. "Debris field. Emergency separation. Parents sent me in the escape pod." Her voice remained flat, emotionless. "They said someone would find me." Pren felt her heart constrict. A separated family. A child alone in space. "We found you, Riley. You are safe now." "And your friend here?" She gestured to the sleeping animal. "Grunt." "Grunt," Pren repeated, finding the name oddly appropriate for the creature's appearance. "Is Grunt your pet?" Riley's eyes met Pren's directly for the first time. Something flickered in that gaze, there and gone too quickly to identify. "Grunt is family." Of course, Pren soothed, though she found the phrasing odd. To her knowledge, most species kept animals as companions or servants, not family members. Perhaps it was a translation error. "Are you hungry, Riley? We can bring you food." "Yes, please." Orvin leaned toward the captain and lowered his voice. "Fascinating. The psychological attachment to the animal is clearly a coping mechanism. Humans must form deep bonds with lesser species to compensate for their own vulnerabilities. I should document this." Drevin shot him a warning look. "She can probably hear you." "She's a child of a barely spacefaring species, Captain. I doubt she understands complex psychological theory." Riley continued petting Grunt with mechanical consistency. Her small fingers disappeared into the thick fur with each stroke. The animal had not opened its eyes once since they'd brought them aboard. Pren returned with a ration pack of neutral protein paste and some dried fruit from their stores. She offered it through the now open barrier. Riley took it with a quiet thank you and began eating with small, efficient bites. She broke off pieces of the fruit and held them near Grunt's nose. The animal finally stirred, snuffled at the offering, and accepted the food with what appeared to be gentle teeth. "See?" Orvin whispered to a junior technician nearby. "Completely domesticated. Probably bred for companionship." No threat whatsoever. The technician, Losh, found the creature oddly cute in a strange alien way. Can I pet it? Let the child eat first, Pren chided. Give them space. But Losh was young and curious, and he'd spent the last 3 months in deep space studying rock formations. A real living creature from a new world was infinitely more interesting than another mineral sample. He approached slowly, one hand extended. Hello, Grunt, nice grunt. Riley looked up from her meal. He doesn't like strangers. I'm sure he's friendly, Losh said with the confidence of someone who'd never met an unfriendly animal. He reached toward Grunt's head. Grunt opened his eyes. They were small, dark, and completely without fear. A low sound emerged from his throat, barely audible but somehow filling the cargo bay with an inexplicable sense of warning. Losh froze, his hand inches from the creature's fur. Losh, withdraw, Drevin ordered. The technician pulled back quickly, his own eyes wide. Sorry, Captain. I just thought, thinking is good. Acting on incomplete information is not. Drevin turned back to Riley. We'll prepare a proper room for you, somewhere more comfortable than our cargo bay. You and Grunt will be safe here until we can locate your family. You have my word. Riley swallowed her last bite of food and met the captain's gaze again. That same flicker appeared in her eyes, and this time Drevin recognized it. Not fear, not trauma, something else entirely. Something calculating. Thank you, Captain, Riley said in her small, polite voice. Grunt and I appreciate your kindness. As the crew began setting up quarters in one of the observation rooms, Pren found herself watching the human child with new attention. The girl sat perfectly still, her hand never leaving the animal's back. Grunt had closed his eyes again, but Pren noticed something she'd missed before. Despite appearing to sleep, every muscle in the creature's compact body remained tense, coiled, ready, like a trap waiting to spring. But that was ridiculous, Pren told herself. They were rescuing a traumatized child and her pet. Nothing more complicated than that. Still, as she helped carry bedding to the new quarters, Pren couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just invited something dangerous onto their peaceful research vessel. Something that knew exactly how harmless it appeared. Something that was counting on them to underestimate it. 3 days had passed since Riley and Grunt moved into Observation Room 7. The space wasn't large, maybe 12 feet across, but it had a proper sleeping pad, a small cleaning station, and a viewport that showed the endless stars. Grunt had claimed the corner nearest the door as his own, while Riley spent most of her time sitting cross-legged on the sleeping pad, staring at the data tablet Pren had given her. Educational materials, Pren had explained when she delivered it. Stories and games for human children, to help you pass the time. Riley had thanked her politely and immediately ignored the children's section. Instead, her small fingers navigated through the ship's public database with surprising efficiency. Species files, ship schematics, basic Talaran language structure, galactic navigation principles. She absorbed information like a sponge absorbs water, quiet and thorough. Orvin visited twice daily, ostensibly to check on her health, but really to observe what he'd started calling human dependency behavior. He brought his recording device and made notes while pretending not to stare. Riley let him think she didn't notice. Remarkable, Orvin said during his morning visit on day 3. He stood just inside the doorway, watching Riley feed Grunt small pieces of prepared meat. The attachment is even stronger than I initially theorized. She prioritizes feeding the animal before herself. Riley looked up, her expression carefully neutral. Grunt needs protein. The fruit and grain mixture you provided first wasn't enough. Ah yes, we adjusted his diet based on your feedback. Orvin tapped something on his own device. Tell me, Riley, on Earth do all humans have companion animals? Some do, some don't. And these companions, they serve emotional support functions? Riley considered the question while scratching behind Grunt's ears. The honey badger made a sound somewhere between a purr and a grunt, his eyes half closed in contentment. They're friends, family, partners. Partners, Orvin repeated, clearly finding the term amusing. But they're non-sapient. They cannot communicate complex thoughts or contribute meaningfully to survival tasks. Can't they? Riley asked, her tone innocent enough that Orvin missed the challenge underneath. He chuckled, a clicking sound from his mandibles. Of course not. They're animals, child. Useful for comfort, certainly, but limited by their biology. Now, Humans like yourself, despite being new to the galactic community, at least possess reasoning capabilities. Though I must say, sending a child into space with only an animal companion seems remarkably irresponsible of your parents. Riley's hand stilled on Grunt's head for just a moment. Grunt's eyes opened fully, fixing on Orvin with an intensity the researcher didn't notice. My parents made the best choice they could. Certainly. I meant no offense. Orvin tapped his device again. I'm preparing a research paper on human psychology. Your species need to bond with lesser creatures as a coping mechanism for your own evolutionary vulnerabilities. Fascinating stuff. It suggests that humans recognize their own weaknesses and compensate through domestication of more capable species. More capable, Riley echoed. Well, certainly this creature has natural weapons, claws, teeth, but without human direction. It's simply an animal acting on instinct, not truly capable of complex problem-solving or strategic thinking, unlike sapient species. Riley returned to petting Grunt, her expression unreadable. You're probably right. Orvin preened slightly at the agreement. I usually am. Well, I should let you rest. We'll reach the nearest human settlement in approximately 15 standard days. Try not to worry too much. After he left, Riley waited exactly 1 minute before whispering to Grunt. He thinks you're stupid. Grunt made a low chuffing, sound that might have been laughter in another species. He thinks I'm helpless, another. Chuff, Riley smiled, small and tight. Good, let's keep it that way. She returned to the data tablet, pulling up the ship's deck plans. She'd already memorized the basic layout, but now she studied the environmental systems, the security protocols, the emergency procedures. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory from hundreds of training sessions back on Earth. Always know your environment, Riley girl. Always have 3 exit routes. Always identify what can be used as a weapon. And always understand who underestimates you. Losh visited in the afternoon, bringing a small plant in a container. Thought you might like something green, he said cheerfully. It's a Talaran fern. Easy to care for. Just a little water every few days. Riley accepted it with genuine pleasure. Thank you. That's very kind. How are you settling in? I know it's not home, but we're doing our best. Everyone's been nice, Riley said honestly. Especially Pren. She reminds me of my aunt. Losh grinned, his mandibles spreading in the Talaran equivalent of a smile. Pren's the best. Raised 3 kids of her own, so she's got that mothering instinct. He glanced at Grunt, who appeared to be sleeping again. Your friend there seems to sleep a lot. He's comfortable. That's when he sleeps best. Can I ask what species he is? Our database doesn't have a match. Honey badger, Riley said. They're from Earth, not very common even there. Honey badger, Losh repeated, committing it to memory. What do they usually do? I mean, in nature? Riley's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. They survive. No matter what, that's nice. Persistence is a good quality. Losh stood to leave, then paused. Hey, if you need anything, just use the comm panel. Someone's always listening. We want you to feel safe here. I do feel safe, Riley assured him. Thank you, Losh. After he left, Riley placed the fern carefully on the small shelf near her sleeping pad. She studied its delicate fronds for a moment, then returned to the data tablet. She'd found something interesting in the security files. The ship had defensive capabilities, minimal ones, but they existed. Mostly designed to deflect micro-debris and manage minor hull breaches. Nothing meant for actual combat, because the Talarans didn't expect combat. They were researchers, explorers, scientists. They moved through the galaxy assuming everyone else operated under the same peaceful principles. Riley found that both admirable and terrifying in equal measure. That night, as the ship's lighting cycled to evening mode, Pren stopped by with a warm drink and a concerned expression. You've been very quiet, little one. Are you feeling well? I'm okay, Riley said, accepting the drink. Some kind of herbal mixture, sweet and soothing. You can talk to me, you know, about your parents, about being scared, about anything. Riley looked at the green carapaced alien who'd shown her nothing but kindness. Part of her wanted to explain everything. To tell Pren about the training, about what Grunt really was, about the fact that she'd already calculated 17 different ways to take control of ship systems if necessary. But instead she just said, I know. Thank you. Pren patted her shoulder gently. Sleep well, Riley. Tomorrow will be better. After Pren left, Riley lay on the sleeping pad and stared at the ceiling. Grunt moved from his corner to curl up beside her, his warm bulk a familiar comfort. She stroked his coarse fur and whispered, "Long-range sensors picked up something today. Did you see the crew's reaction?" Grunt's ear twitched. He'd seen. They ignored it. "Probably just debris," they said. Riley's voice dropped even lower. "Grandpa would have told them to run diagnostics. Would have increased alert status. Would have at least checked." Grunt made a questioning rumble. "No," Riley agreed. "They won't. Because they don't think like that. Don't know how to think like that." She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. Somewhere in the back of her mind, instincts honed by years of her grandfather's training whispered warnings. The ship was too quiet. The crew was too comfortable. And that ignored sensor reading felt wrong. But maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe her grandfather had trained her too well. Made her see threats where none existed. Maybe these kind aliens really were going to deliver her safely to a human settlement, and nothing bad would happen at all. Riley desperately wanted to believe that. Grunt, pressed against her side, remained alert long after she finally fell asleep. His small dark eyes stayed fixed on the door, and every muscle in his compact body stayed ready, because honey badgers didn't hope for the best. They prepared for the worst. The shrill wail of emergency alarms tore through the ship like claws through fabric. Riley jerked awake, her heart already racing before her mind fully caught up. Beside her, Grunt was instantly on his feet, every muscle taut, his head swiveling toward the door. The overhead lights had switched from their soft evening glow to harsh red pulses that painted everything in blood-colored shadows. Captain Dreven's voice crackled through the comm system, strained and urgent. "All crew, this is not a drill. We have unauthorized boarding in progress. Secure yourselves immediately. I repeat, we are being boarded." Riley rolled off the sleeping pad and dropped to a crouch. Her hands moved automatically through the motions her grandfather had drilled into her hundreds of times. Check exits. Assess threats. Identify resources. Stay low, stay quiet, stay alive. Through the small window in her door, she could see the corridor outside. Empty for now, but she heard sounds. Heavy footfalls, metal scraping against metal, and something else screaming. One of the crew members cut short mid-cry. Grunt positioned himself between Riley and the door, his body language completely transformed from the lazy, peaceful creature the Talorans had observed. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that suddenly seemed much larger than before. A low growl built in his chest so deep Riley felt it through the floor more than heard it. "Quiet," she whispered. "Not yet." The honey badger went silent instantly, but the tension in his frame only increased. Riley moved to the door panel, pressing her ear against it. She could hear voices now. Not Taloran. These were rougher, with a hissing quality that suggested reptilian vocal cords. The words came through her translator clearly enough. "Sweep every room. Take anything valuable. Crew members go in the cargo hold. Anyone resists, make an example. What about the research data? Tech specialist is handling that. We just round up the soft-bodied scientists and let them know what happens when you fly through raider territory without proper protection." Footsteps past her door. Riley counted. 3 sets, heavy, armed probably. She heard another door slide open further down the corridor, followed by Losh's voice, high with fear. "Please, we're just researchers. We don't have anything worth—" The sound of something hitting flesh. Losh cried out, then went quiet. More footsteps. More doors opening. The raiders were working their way through the ship methodically, room by room. Riley's mind raced. She pulled up the mental map she'd memorized from the data tablet. The observation rooms were on Deck 2. The cargo hold was on Deck 1. Between her and any useful control systems were at least 3 corridors and probably half a dozen raiders. Her room had 1 exit. No weapons, no armor. Just a 7-year-old girl and a honey badger. But she did have one advantage. They didn't know she was here. In the chaos of the boarding, no one had thought to mention the human child in Observation Room 7. To the raiders, she was invisible. An unknown factor. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory again. "When you're small and overlooked, Riley girl, that's not a weakness. That's the best weapon you've got. Use it." She looked down at Grunt. His dark eyes met hers, completely focused, completely ready. She'd raised him from a kit, or more accurately, he'd grown up alongside her under her grandfather's supervision. The old man had served in Earth's military for 30 years and believed that survival training should start young. For both humans and animals. Honey badgers are nature's berserkers. Her grandfather had explained when Riley was 5 and Grunt was barely weaned. They don't know fear the way other creatures do. They don't back down. They don't quit. And if you earn their loyalty, they'll fight beside you against anything. Through the door, she heard more sounds of violence. Pren's voice trying to calm someone. Captain Drevin attempting to negotiate. A raider laughing at the attempt. Riley felt something cold settle in her chest. These people had been kind to her. They'd rescued her, fed her, tried to comfort her. They'd treated her like family, and now they needed help. She pressed her hand against the door panel and closed her eyes, thinking. The Tallarans weren't fighters. They didn't know how to resist. They'd probably surrender peacefully and hope for rescue later. That was the civilized response. The reasonable response. But Riley had been raised by a man who'd survived 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. She knew what happened to prisoners when no rescue came. She knew raiders didn't take captives out of kindness. We have to help them, she whispered to Grunt. The honey badger made a sound between a chirp and a growl. Agreement. Riley accessed the door panel, using the credentials Pren had given her for emergencies. The door slid open silently. The corridor beyond was empty, but she could hear sounds of struggle from the main common area. She could hear Orvin's voice, unusually sharp with fear, demanding they be treated according to galactic law. A raider's response was a harsh laugh and the sound of something breaking. She moved into the corridor, staying low, Grunt at her side like a silver shadow. They reached the corner and Riley risked a glance around it. 3 raiders stood in the common area, tall reptilian figures with mottled green scales and armor that looked cobbled together from a dozen different sources. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. Between them, the Tallaran crew huddled together, Pren's arm around young Losh, Captain Drevin standing protectively in front of his people. One raider jabbed Drevin with the butt of his weapon. Move, cargo hold now. We'll cooperate, Drevin said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. There's no need for violence. Take what you want, just don't hurt my crew. What we want is everything, the raider said. Ship, cargo, research, and maybe we sell some of you to labor markets. Tallarans fetch decent prices. Weak, but trainable. Riley pulled back around the corner. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 armed raiders, probably more elsewhere on the ship. She had no weapons, no backup, no training in actual combat beyond her grandfather's basic lessons. This was insane. This was impossible. But possible or not, she couldn't just hide while good people got hurt. She looked down at Grunt. The honey badger's eyes gleamed in the red emergency lighting. His claws flexed against the floor. Every line of his body said the same thing. Ready? Riley took a deep breath. Then another. She thought about everything her grandfather had taught her. About weak points. About surprise. About how the most dangerous thing in any fight wasn't the biggest or strongest, but the one nobody expected. She thought about Pren, who'd brought her warm drinks and worried about her nightmares. About Losh, who'd given her a plant just to make her smile. About Captain Drevin, who'd given his word to keep her safe. Family, she'd told them. Grunt is family. These people were family now, too. Riley touched Grunt's head once, a gesture of connection and understanding. Then she whispered 4 words that would change everything. Attack. High targets, go. Grunt launched forward like a missile wrapped in fur and fury. He rounded the corner at full speed, his low-slung body a blur of silver and black. The raiders had exactly enough time to register movement before 20 pounds of concentrated rage and teeth slammed into the nearest one's leg. The raider's scream echoed through the ship, shrill and disbelieving. Grunt's jaws locked onto scaled flesh and his claws found purchase in the gaps of cobbled armor. He climbed the raider like a ladder, shredding as he went, aiming for the soft throat with the precision of a born predator. Riley didn't watch. She was already moving, running low and fast toward the environmental control panel she'd memorized the location of days ago. The other 2 raiders spun toward Grunt, weapons raised, but they hesitated. The small creature was attached to their companion, and firing meant hitting their own. That hesitation cost them precious seconds. Seconds Riley used to reach the panel and start entering commands with fingers that moved faster than thought. Muscle memory taking over where fear tried to freeze her. Behind her, Grunt's victim finally managed to throw him off. But the honey badger hit the floor rolling and immediately attacked again. Not the same raider, the second one. Low, fast, merciless. Riley's fingers flew across the panel. Emergency bulkheads, environmental controls. communication systems. She knew what she was doing. She'd studied this. She'd prepared. She just hoped she was fast enough. The third raider finally oriented on the real threat, not the animal, the human child at the control panel. He raised his weapon, energy crackling along its barrel. Riley hit the final command and dove sideways as the shot scorched the wall where she'd been standing a second before. Throughout the ship, emergency bulkheads slammed shut with thunderous booms. Sections sealed. Raiders found themselves cut off from each other. Isolated, and in the common area, 3 raiders faced a nightmare they'd never imagined. A small human girl who'd just taken control of their battlefield, and a honey badger who had absolutely no intention of stopping. The raider who'd fired at Riley was named Skarn, and in his 12 years of raiding ships across 4 sectors, he'd never encountered anything like this. The small human child rolled to her feet with the grace of trained muscle memory, not the clumsy panic of a frightened juvenile. And the creature, that flat-bodied demon thing, it didn't fight like an animal. It fought like it wanted to kill. Grunt latched onto the second raider's arm, the one holding a weapon. His teeth punched through scales that should have been too tough, his claws finding every gap in armor with surgical precision. The raider shrieked and tried to shake him off, but honey badgers had evolved specifically to not let go. The weapon clattered to the floor. Skarn adjusted his aim, tracking the child as she sprinted toward the fallen weapon. "Clever little thing," he hissed. But not clever enough, he fired. The energy bolt scorched past Riley's shoulder, missing by inches. She didn't slow down. Her small hands closed around the weapon, far too large for her to wield properly, but she didn't try to fire it. Instead, she kicked it hard, sending it skittering across the floor toward Captain Drevin. The Talaran captain stared at the weapon like he'd never seen one before. Which, Riley realized with sinking certainty, he probably hadn't. Not up close, not as something he was expected to use. "Shoot him!" Riley shouted, diving behind a support column as another energy bolt carved a burning line through the air. "Captain, shoot him!" But Drevin just stood there, frozen, his peaceful researcher's mind unable to make the leap to violence even in self-defense. The weapon lay at his feet, untouched. The first raider, the one Grunt had initially attacked, finally managed to draw a blade. He slashed at the honey badger with desperate strength. The blade connected, slicing through fur and hide. Blood splattered. Grunt made no sound. Didn't even flinch. He just redirected his attack, going for the raider's face now, claws extended like knives. The raider's screams intensified. He stumbled backward, blade forgotten, both hands trying to protect his eyes. Grunt rode him down as he fell, relentless and unstoppable. Riley's mind raced through calculations. 3 raiders in this room. Grunt could handle 1, maybe 2 if she was lucky, but he was bleeding now. Not badly, not yet, but the wound would slow him eventually. The third raider, Skarn, had her pinned behind the column. And the Talarans were useless in a fight, too conditioned to piece to act. She needed to change the equation, needed an advantage. Her hand found the small utility knife on her belt, the one Pren had given her for cutting food, 3 inches of dull metal, not a weapon by any reasonable definition. But her grandfather's voice echoed again. "Anything's a weapon if you're desperate enough and smart enough." Skarn was advancing on her position, weapon raised, confident now. "Come out, human child. Your pet can't save you from here. Maybe I keep you. Young ones fetch better prices. And you're interesting. Definitely interesting." Riley pressed herself against the column, breathing hard, thinking harder. Skarn was maybe 7 feet tall, armored, armed, trained. She was small, unarmed for practical purposes, and running on instincts she'd practiced but never tested in real combat. But she had one thing Skarn didn't have. She'd spent 3 days mapping the ship. She knew where everything was, including the fire suppression system controls built into the support columns. Her fingers found the emergency panel. One hard yank and the cover popped free. Skarn heard the sound and rushed forward, weapon aimed around the column. Riley wasn't there. She'd dropped flat and rolled away the moment she'd opened the panel. Behind her, the fire suppression system activated with a violent hiss. Chemical foam exploded outward, engulfing Skarn in a white cloud that stuck to his scales, his armor, his weapon. It wasn't designed as a weapon, but it blinded him instantly and sent him staggering backward, clawing at his eyes. "Grunt," Riley called. "New target. Left side." The honey badger's head snapped toward her voice. He saw Skarn, blind and vulnerable. He disengaged from the first raider, who lay on the ground moaning and bleeding from a dozen wounds, and launched himself at the new threat with undiminished fury. Skarn never saw him coming. One moment he was clearing foam from his eyes. The next he had claws shredding through the underside of his jaw, teeth seeking the soft flesh of his throat. He went down hard, weapon firing wild shots into the ceiling. The third raider, the one who'd lost his weapon to Grunt's initial attack, made a decision. He ran, turned and sprinted for the nearest exit, only to slam face first into an emergency bulkhead Riley had sealed earlier. He staggered, dazed, and slumped against the wall. Silence fell over the common area, broken only by the ragged breathing of injured raiders and the soft growls coming from Grunt as he maintained his position on Skarn's chest, jaws still locked on the raider's throat, not quite biting through but making it very clear he could. Riley stood slowly, her whole body shaking now that the immediate threat had passed. She looked at the Talaran crew, huddled together staring at her with expressions that ranged from shock to fear to something she couldn't quite identify. Captain Drevin found his voice first. "Riley, what did you just—" "Saved you," Riley said simply. She walked over to where the unused weapon still lay on the floor and picked it up. It was heavy, awkward in her small hands, but she managed. She pointed it at the conscious raiders with surprising steadiness. "Grunt, hold position." The honey badger adjusted his grip slightly but didn't release Skarn's throat. The raider beneath him had gone very, very still. Pren stepped forward, her green carapace splattered with foam and blood, her eyes wide. "You're bleeding." Riley glanced down. There was blood on her arm, a graze from one of Skarn's shots that she hadn't even felt. "I'm okay." "Grunt's worse." "That creature," Orvin breathed. "That creature is a honey badger," Riley finished. "From Earth, I told you." "You didn't tell us they were weapons," Orvin said, his voice strangled. "I told you they were family. I told you they survive. You just didn't listen." Riley kept the weapon trained on the raiders even though two were barely conscious and the third was very convincingly surrendering by staying motionless under Grunt's teeth. "How many more are on the ship?" Captain Drevin blinked, his mind struggling to shift from researcher to tactician. The boarding alert said 6 breached the hull. 3 here. That leaves 3 more. Where? "I don't know. Cargo bay probably. Engineering, maybe the bridge." Riley nodded. "The bulkheads have them cut off from each other. Isolated. Captain, I need you to focus. Can you secure these 3? Tie them up, lock them somewhere, whatever works." Yes, I can do that." Drevin seemed to physically pull himself together. "Losh, Orvin, help me. We need restraints." As the Talarans moved with shaky purpose, Pren approached Riley slowly. "Little one Riley, where did you learn to do this?" Riley met her eyes. "My grandfather. He was military. He taught me that being small doesn't mean being helpless. It just means people underestimate you. He taught a child combat tactics. He taught me to survive. There's a difference." Riley's voice softened slightly. "Are you hurt? Is everyone okay?" "Bruises, fear, but alive." Pren touched Riley's shoulder gently. "Because of you. You saved us." "Not done yet," Riley said. 3 more raiders, and I need to figure out how to reach them without getting us killed." She walked to the comm panel on the wall, keeping the weapon in one hand. The ship's internal communication was still functional, though the raiders had tried to jam external signals. She could work with that. Riley pulled up a schematic overlay and highlighted the sections where the remaining raiders were isolated. 1 in the cargo bay, 1 in engineering, 1 on the bridge, all sealed behind emergency bulkheads, all probably very confused about why their easy raid had suddenly become a nightmare. She activated the ship-wide intercom, routing it only to the sections where the raiders were trapped. When she spoke, her voice carried a confidence she didn't entirely feel but knew she needed to project. "This is Riley, speaking to the raiders currently stuck behind sealed bulkheads. Your companions in the common area are down. 1 has multiple injuries. 1 is unconscious. 1 is currently being held by a honey badger who is very, very unhappy with your life choices." She paused, letting that sink in. "You have 1 chance to leave this ship alive. Drop your weapons. Move to the nearest airlock. I'll unseal the bulkheads in sequence to let you retreat. Your ship is still attached. You can still escape. But if you resist, if you hurt any more of this crew, I will not hold back. And trust me when I say you don't want to see what else Earth taught me." Silence stretched across the comm channel. Then a voice crackled back, rough and angry. "You're bluffing." You're a child. Riley looked down at Grunt, still holding Skarn's throat, blood matting his silver fur. She looked at the raiders on the floor, one missing part of his face, another covered in chemical foam, the third with claw marks shredded through his armor. She looked at the Talaran crew, seeing her with new eyes, understanding finally what humanity really meant. She pressed the comm button again. I'm a human child, she corrected. And my grandfather always said that was the most dangerous kind. You have 2 minutes to start moving toward the airlocks. After that, I stopped being nice. She released the button and turned to Captain Drevin. I need you to monitor the cameras. Tell me if they're moving. Drevin stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. What have your people created? He asked quietly. What kind of species trains their children like this? Riley considered the question. A species that survived. A species that knows peace is a gift, not a guarantee. A species that bonds with other predators and calls them family. She reached down and gently touched Grunt's head. A species that protects its own. On the monitor, one of the isolated raiders began moving toward an airlock. Then the second. The third took longer, but eventually he moved too. Riley allowed herself a small breath of relief. But she didn't lower the weapon, didn't relax her guard. Because her grandfather had taught her one more lesson. The most important one. It's not over until it's over, and even then, stay ready. Because predators, whether human or honey badger, never truly let their guard down. That's how they survive. The cargo bay airlock cycled with a hollow clang that echoed through the ship's internal sensors. Riley watched on the monitor as the last raider stumbled through, joining his companions in their damaged vessel. Their retreat looked nothing like the confident assault they'd launched less than an hour ago. These were defeated soldiers, bloody and bewildered, moving with the jerky uncertainty of people who'd encountered something beyond their comprehension. She waited until their ship detached with a magnetic thud before allowing herself to exhale. Only then did she lower the weapon she'd been holding, her small arms shaking from the strain of keeping it steady for so long. They're gone, Captain Drevin confirmed, studying his console. Their vessel is limping away. Drive signatures show damage. They won't be bothering anyone for a while. Riley set the weapon down carefully and immediately dropped to her knees beside Grunt. The honey badger had finally released Skarn's throat once Riley gave the command, but the cost of the fight was evident. His silver fur was matted with blood from the slash wound, and now that the battle fury had faded, he moved with a slight hitch in his gait. Let me see, Riley murmured, her hands gentle as she examined the cut. It ran along his shoulder, not deep enough to be life-threatening, but definitely needing attention. You did so good, Grunt. So good. The honey badger made a soft chirping sound and pressed his broad head against her chest. For all his ferocity in battle, in this moment he was just an injured animal seeking comfort from the person he trusted most. Pren approached slowly, her medical bag in hand. May I? I'm not familiar with his species' physiology, but I can see it needs treatment. Riley nodded, grateful. He'll let you help. He knows you're safe. As Pren began cleaning and dressing Grunt's wound with steady, practiced movements, the rest of the crew emerged from their shock in stages. Losh sat heavily against a wall, his hands still trembling. Orvin stood frozen, staring at his overturned research notes and dropped datapad as if seeing them for the first time. Captain Drevin moved through the common area with mechanical efficiency, checking systems and securing the 3 captured raiders who'd been bound and locked in a storage compartment. The silence stretched until finally, Orvin spoke. His voice came out smaller than Riley had ever heard it. I wrote that you were psychologically dependent on lesser species, that humans needed animals because of your own vulnerabilities. Riley looked up from watching Pren work. You did. I was wrong. Orvin approached slowly, his thin frame seeming even more fragile in the aftermath of violence. Catastrophically wrong. That creature, Grunt, he's not dependent on you. You're not dependent on him. You're partners, Riley finished. I told you. You just thought it meant something different than it does. Partners, Orvin repeated as if tasting a new concept. He fights beside you. Not for you. Beside you. That's what family does. Pren finished wrapping Grunt's shoulder and sat back on her heels. The wound is clean. He should heal well, though I suspect his species heals better than most. She looked at Riley with new respect. Your grandfather trained you both. It wasn't a question, but Riley answered anyway. From when I was little. He said the galaxy was bigger and more dangerous than anyone wanted to admit. He said humans made it to space, but we made it as prey species who'd learned to fight like predators, and that the best thing we ever did was figure out how to make other predators our friends. Honey badgers, Losh said from his position against the wall, his voice hoarse. I looked them up while you were fighting. In the ship's extended database, there's a file. It says they're considered one of the most fearless animals on Earth, that they fight lions, kill snakes, that they never, ever give up. That's true, Riley confirmed. It also says they're nearly impossible to domesticate, that most attempts to keep them result in destroyed property and injuries. Losh's eyes were wide. How did you? He's not domesticated, Riley said firmly. He's family. There's a difference. Domestication is about control. Family is about trust and choice. Grunt chooses to stay with me. I choose to stay with him. We protect each other. Captain Drevin finished his security sweep and joined the group. He moved slower than usual, as if his body had aged a decade in the last hour. Riley, I need to understand something. That fighting, that tactical thinking, the way you took control of the ship's systems. You're 7 years old? 7.5, Riley corrected automatically, then shrugged at how childish it sounded. My grandfather started teaching me when I was 4. Basic stuff at first. How to stay calm. How to observe. How to think 3 steps ahead. It got more complex as I got older. That's not normal childhood education, Pren said gently. No, Riley agreed. It's not. But Grandpa served in the military for 30 years. He saw things. Lost people. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to my parents, if I ever ended up alone, I'd know how to survive. Her voice dropped. Guess he was right to worry. The weight of that statement settled over the group. This child had been separated from her family, lost in space, and her response had been to study their ship and prepare for worst-case scenarios. Because someone had loved her enough to teach her how. Your people, Orvin began, then stopped. Started again. Humanity. You're not weak, are you? The new species stumbling into the galactic community, hoping to be accepted. That's not what you are at all. Riley considered her response carefully. We're not weak, but we're not strong either. Not the way you're thinking. We're adaptable. We're survivors. We look at other species and see potential friends instead of competitors. We looked at wolves thousands of years ago and saw partners. We looked at horses and saw transportation and companionship. We looked at honey badgers and saw warriors, Captain Drevin finished. Family, Riley corrected again. Warriors can be family. That's the part everyone keeps missing. Grunt, his wound now properly dressed, hobbled over to the storage locker where the captured raiders were secured. He sat down in front of it, clearly establishing himself as a guard. Despite his injury, despite the exhaustion that had to be pulling at him, he took up a defensive position. Because the job wasn't done until everyone was safe. Pren watched him with something like awe. He's still protecting us. Of course he is, Riley said. You're packed now. In his understanding, you're part of our family. He'll defend you the same way he'd defend me. Because you decided we were family, Pren said softly. A child and her companion decided we were worth protecting. And we, who thought ourselves civilized and advanced, needed that protection desperately. The common area fell silent again as the truth of that settled in. The Tallarans, with all their technology and scientific knowledge and peaceful principles, had been utterly helpless against raiders. A 7-year-old human girl and a 20-pound animal had saved them. Losh broke the silence with a question that sounded almost afraid. What are humans going to be like when they're not children anymore? When you're all grown, with ships and weapons and organized military? If one child can do this? Riley met his eyes. Humans have had organized military for thousands of years. We've had ships and weapons and all the tools of war for longer than we've had space travel. But that's not what makes us dangerous. Then what does? Captain Drevin asked. Riley reached out and stroked Grunt's head, her small hand gentle on his blood-matted fur. We remember who was kind to us, and we protect them. Humans don't bond easily, not really. We're cautious, suspicious, we've learned to be. But once you're in, she looked up at the crew, at these aliens who'd rescued her and fed her and worried about her nightmares. Once you're family, we'll fight the whole galaxy for you if we have to. That's, Orvin started, then seemed to lose the words. Terrifying. Losh supplied. No, Pren said firmly. She knelt beside Riley and took the girl's small hand in her own larger, carapaced one. That's beautiful. Terrifying, yes, but beautiful, she squeezed gently. Thank you, Riley, for choosing to make us family, for protecting us when we couldn't protect ourselves. Riley felt something hot sting her eyes. She'd been holding herself together through pure determination and training, but Pren's kindness cracked something in her armor. She was 7 years old. She'd been separated from her parents. She just fought for her life, and now someone was thanking her for it with genuine warmth. The tears came fast and unexpected. I was scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. I was so scared. Pren pulled her into a hug, careful and warm. I know, little one, I know. But you were brave anyway. That's what makes it courage. Riley cried into Pren's shoulder while Grunt pressed against her leg, offering his own form of comfort. The rest of the crew gave them space, moving to clean up the common area and begin repairs on damaged systems. But they moved with new purpose, with new understanding. They'd been rescued by a child, by a creature they'd dismissed as a pet, and in the process they'd learned that the galaxy was bigger and stranger, and more dangerous than their peaceful research missions had prepared them for. But they'd also learned that humanity, this new species they'd barely begun to understand, had something special, something that couldn't be measured in weapons or ships or technology. The ability to form bonds that transcended species, to choose family from among strangers, to protect that family with every resource available. Captain Drevin pulled up his personal log and began recording. His voice was steady, but his words were careful and deliberate. Personal note. First contact reassessment. Humanity is not a weak species in need of guidance. They are a bonding species, a protective species, a warrior culture that chooses its battles based on loyalty rather than gain. Recommendation for all Talaran vessels. Treat humans as valuable allies. Make them family if you can, because the alternative is making them enemies. And I suspect that would be the last mistake any species ever makes. He closed the log and looked at Riley, still crying quietly in Pren's arms, her fierce protector of a honey badger standing guard beside her. One small human child, one animal companion, and 17 Talaran lives saved. The raiders had called her Helpless, had seen a child and an animal and assumed easy targets. They'd learned better. They'd learned what it meant to underestimate Earth. Drevin just hoped the rest of the galaxy learned the lesson before they made the same mistake. Because next time it might not be a 7-year-old girl showing mercy. It might be her grandfather, or her parents, or an entire civilization of humans who'd learned to survive by making the galaxy's fiercest creatures their friends. And that, Drevin thought with a shiver he couldn't quite suppress, would be something to witness. Terrifying, but beautiful in its own way, just like the small human currently crying in his medic's arms while her battle-scarred honey badger stood watch over them all. 6 days after the raid, the Talaran research vessel approached the human settlement at Tyson Station. Riley stood in the observation deck, watching the sprawling structure grow larger in the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent material. Grunt sat beside her, his shoulder wound healing cleanly under Pren's continued care. The honey badger had traded his guard position for something more relaxed now that the threat had passed. But Riley noticed he still tracked every crew member who entered the room. The ship felt different now. Quieter in some ways, louder in others. The crew moved with a new awareness, checking sensors more frequently, running security drills that Orvin had designed based on what he'd learned. They'd become students of survival, taught by a 7-year-old and her companion. Captain Drevin entered the observation deck, his posture less formal than usual. In the days since the attack, he'd spent hours talking with Riley, learning about Earth, about human culture, about the training philosophy that had saved his crew. His official reports to the Talaran Council had been extensive and, he suspected, would change how his people viewed humanity forever. We'll be docking in 2 hours, he said, standing beside Riley. I've already sent messages ahead. Your family evacuated to Tyson when their ship had that malfunction. They've been searching for you. Riley's hands clenched on the railing. My parents are there? Your parents, your grandfather, and about 24 other relatives who've been demanding updates every 6 hours. Drevin's mandibles curved in what Riley had learned was his version of a smile. Your grandfather in particular has been, let's say, persistent in his communications. That sounds like him, Riley said, feeling something tight in her chest loosen. They were alive. They'd made it. Soon she'd be with them again. Riley, Drevin began, then paused. I want you to know what you did for us, what you taught us. My crew will never forget it. I will never forget it. You rescued me first, Riley pointed out. You could have just left me in that pod. Kept going with your research. We did what any decent people would do. You did what warriors do. There's a difference. Drevin looked down at Grunt. Your companion there. He's healing well. Pren's been great with him. Better than I expected, honestly. She's been studying Earth animals every spare moment. We all have. Trying to understand how your species managed to form these bonds. Drevin's voice carried genuine curiosity. The more I learn, the more remarkable it seems. You domesticated hundreds of species. Not as servants or slaves, but as partners. Not all of them worked out, Riley admitted. Humans tried to domesticate zebras. That failed pretty badly. Same with most big cats. But the ones that did work, like dogs and horses and even Grunt's ancestors to a degree, they changed everything for us, made us better, stronger, more capable. By recognizing that different didn't mean enemy. Exactly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the station grow closer. Then Drevin said, I'm including a personal recommendation in my report, suggesting that the Talaran Council establish formal alliance protocols with Earth. Not just trade agreements, actual partnership. Riley looked up at him, surprised. Because of what happened. Because of what could happen if we make humanity our friends instead of just another species we study from a distance. Drevin met her eyes. Your grandfather was right to train you. The galaxy is dangerous, but it's less dangerous with the right allies. And I suspect humans make very, very good allies. Pren arrived with Losh in tow, both carrying packages. We have something for you, Pren announced. Well, several somethings. They laid the packages on a nearby table. Riley approached curiously, Grunt at her heels. The first package contained a data chip. All of our research, Orvin explained, joining the group. Everything we've learned about galactic species, politics, technology, compressed and formatted for human systems. Consider it a thank you gift. The second package held what looked like a communication device, sleek and compact. Personal comm unit, Losh said. Linked to our ship's network, so you can contact us. If you want to. I mean, if you'd like to stay in touch. I'd like that, Riley said genuinely. I'd like that a lot. The third package was from Pren. Inside was a small plant, the Talaran fern she'd given Riley earlier, now in a more permanent container with care instructions. So you remember us, Pren said softly. And so you have something growing. Something alive and peaceful. Riley carefully accepted each gift, feeling emotion well up again. These aliens had gone from treating her as an interesting specimen to genuine friends. Family, even. Thank you. All of you. For everything. We should be thanking you, Losh said. You saved our lives. You gave me hope when I was lost, Riley countered. That matters just as much. Captain Drevin cleared his throat. There's one more thing. We took a vote. The crew was unanimous. He pulled out a small medallion on a chain. The metal caught the light, engraved with symbols Riley recognized as Talaran writing. This is a family crest. In our culture, it's given to those we consider part of our extended family network. It means you're always welcome on our vessels, that you have people who will answer if you call for help, that you're one of us. Riley took the medallion with shaking hands. The metal was warm and the weight of it felt significant. She traced the engravings with one finger. I don't know what to say. Say you'll remember us as fondly as we'll remember you, Pren said. Say you'll teach other humans what you taught us. That different species can become family. That strength comes from bonds, not just weapons. I will, Riley promised. I'll make sure people know about the Talarans who saved me, who became my family when I needed one. She carefully put the medallion around her neck. It hung heavy and precious against her chest. Grunt sniffed at it once, seemed to approve, and returned to his position at Riley's side. The final approach to Tyson Station took another hour. Riley spent it on the bridge with the crew, watching the docking procedures with interest. The Talarans explained each step, no longer treating her like a child who needed simplification but as someone who might genuinely understand. She asked questions. They answered. Knowledge flowed both ways. When the docking clamps finally engaged and the airlock pressurized, Riley felt her heart start to race. Somewhere beyond that door were her parents. Her grandfather, home or as close to it as she could get out here in space. Pren walked her to the airlock, Grunt padding along beside them. "Are you ready?" Riley took a breath. "I think so. I'm nervous." "That's normal. You've been through a lot." Pren knelt down to Riley's level. "But you're not alone anymore. You have your family waiting, and you have us wherever you go." "Family across species," Riley said. "The best kind," Pren agreed. The airlock door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it, Riley could see the docking corridor. And at the end of that corridor, she could see people. Human people. Her people. A woman with dark hair and desperate eyes saw her first. "Riley!" The cry was somewhere between a shout and a sob. Riley's mother ran down the corridor with no regard for docking protocols or safety procedures. Behind her came Riley's father, moving just as fast, and behind him an older man with gray hair and military bearing, who moved with purpose despite his age. Riley met them halfway, Grunt keeping pace. Her parents dropped to their knees and pulled her into a hug so tight it hurt. Both of them crying and talking over each other, checking her for injuries, asking if she was okay, saying they'd been so scared. Through it all, Riley's grandfather stood back, giving them their moment. But his eyes were on Riley, sharp and assessing. When her parents finally loosened their grip enough for her to breathe, he stepped forward. "Riley, girl," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Grandpa," she replied. He studied her for a long moment, took in her stance, her expression, the way she held herself. Looked at Grunt, noting the healing wound and the alert positioning. Then his eyes landed on the Talaran medallion around her neck. "Looks like you had an adventure." "Yes, sir." "Did you remember your training?" "Yes, sir." "Did you protect yourself and others?" Riley met his eyes steadily. "Yes, sir." Her grandfather's stern expression cracked into a proud smile. "That's my girl. Knew I taught you right." He looked past her to where the Talaran crew stood in their airlock watching the reunion. "And these folks helped?" "They saved me first," Riley said. "Then I saved them. Then we all saved each other. They're family now, Grandpa. They gave me this." She touched the medallion. Her grandfather's eyebrows rose. He walked past Riley toward the Talarans, and for a moment she worried about what he might say. But he simply extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm Riley's grandfather. Former military. I want to thank you for taking care of my granddaughter." Captain Drevin accepted the handshake, mimicking the gesture with only slight awkwardness. "She took care of us, sir. You trained her well. Trained her to survive. Looks like she did you one better and thrived." The old man's eyes twinkled. "She tell you about honey badgers?" "We learned," Drevin said with feeling. "Extensively." Riley's grandfather laughed, a deep sound that echoed down the corridor. "I bet you did. These critters don't do anything halfway." He looked down at Grunt. "Hey there, soldier. Heard you did good work." Grunt made his huffing sound and tilted his head. Riley's grandfather pulled something from his pocket and offered it. Grunt sniffed, then accepted the treat with careful teeth. "You came prepared," Riley observed. "Always," her grandfather said. "Now then," he turned back to the Talarans. "My family owes you a debt. You kept my granddaughter safe. In my culture, that means you're under our protection now, too. You ever need help, human help, you call? We'll answer." "We would be honored," Captain Drevin said formally, "and we extend the same offer. The Talarans are humanity's friends now. We'll make sure our people know it." "Good." Riley's grandfather offered another handshake. "Good people recognizing other good people. That's how civilization should work." Riley's mother finally pulled her attention back from the Talarans. "Riley, sweetheart, are you really okay? You're not hurt?" "I'm okay, Mom, I promise." She was scared, Pren offered, stepping forward. But she was brave. She protected all of us. "Your daughter is remarkable." "She's 7, Riley's father said, as if that explained everything. "She's human," Orvin corrected. "We've learned that means something very different than we thought." The humans and Talarans talked for another hour, exchanging information, making plans, establishing the beginnings of what would become a formal alliance. Riley stood between both groups, literally and figuratively a bridge between species. Grunt sat at her feet, patient and watchful as always. Finally, as the farewells were being said and the humans prepared to return to their section of the station, Pren pulled Riley aside one last time. "Will you be all right, really? I will, Riley assured her. I have my family back. I have Grunt. I have new friends across the galaxy. I think I'm going to be better than all right. What will you do now? When you grow up? Riley looked at her grandfather, who was enthusiastically discussing military tactics with Captain Drevin. She looked at her parents, who'd spent days desperately searching for her. She looked at Grunt, who'd fought beside her without hesitation, and she looked at the Tallarans, who'd become her unexpected family. I think, she said slowly, I want to do what you do. Explore, meet new species. But also what Grandpa does. Protect people, help them understand each other. Be a bridge, she smiled. There's got to be a job that combines research and security, right? Diplomatic protection services, Pren suggested. Scholars who can defend themselves and others. It's rare, but it exists. Then that's what I'll be, Riley decided, when I'm old enough. Until then, I'll keep learning. Keep training, so next time someone needs help, I'm ready. Next time, Pren said softly. Try not to need quite so much excitement. Riley laughed. I'll do my best. The final farewells were said. Promises to stay in contact were made and meant. Riley and her family, along with Grunt, headed into Tyson Station proper. The Tallarans returned to their ship, already preparing their reports and their journey home. As Riley walked between her parents, her grandfather's hand on her shoulder and Grunt at her heels, she felt complete in a way she hadn't since the emergency separation. She'd been lost, then found. She'd been scared, then brave. She'd been alone, then surrounded by family, both old and new. Behind her, the Tallaran ship began its departure procedures. Aboard, Orvin was already writing a new research paper. This one was titled Humanity, a study in bonding, survival, and the true meaning of family. It would become required reading for every Tallaran who ventured into space, and eventually for many other species as well, because the galaxy had learned an important lesson from one small human child and her honey badger companion. They'd learned that Helpless was just what you looked like before you decided not to be. They'd learned that family could span species and stars. They'd learned that humans, those strange new creatures from Earth, had something special. Not superior technology, not greater strength, not ancient wisdom. They had each other. And anyone who earned their loyalty became part of that vast protective circle. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it was less lonely now. Because humans had arrived, and wherever they went, they brought with them the most powerful force in the universe, the ability to look at something different and see family instead of enemy, the courage to protect that family against any threat, the wisdom to know that strength came not from standing alone but from standing together. Riley's grandfather had taught her to survive. The Tallarans had shown her how to thrive, and together they'd proven something important, that the smallest among us can be the strongest, that bonds matter more than weapons, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the biggest predator or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it's just a 7-year-old girl who refuses to let bad things happen to good people, and her honey badger who agrees completely with that philosophy. They called her Helpless. They learned better, and the galaxy was better for the lesson,